Welcome to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered with Perry Clark. This program looks at mental health from unique perspectives and shows you how to manage your life by finding the knots that help you and stay away from the ones that could be a disadvantage. Now, here is your host, Perry Clark.
Hello all, welcome back to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. I'm Perry Clark, licensed marriage and family therapist, here with you. And I remind you, as always, that this podcast is for entertainment and educational purposes only. It does not constitute a visit with a mental health worker. Please seek one out in your area, whether it's physical, which we all know we would prefer, include digital, just because your life is important and there's stuff for you to enjoy, and you can enjoy it more maximized by also being mentally healthy. So, with this particular recording, and normally for Pride Month, I usually do a lot more recordings, but as I've said, I'm having to cut back just because of life and expectations. But we have the pleasure of continuing the conversation we started earlier for the month of April here with Dr. Jonathan Mathis Lester, who wrote How I Know White People Are Crazy and Other Stories of a Frustrated Black Psychologist. So we're going to continue our discussion here, especially because, and as we noted during our other one of the subject areas that doesn't get much talked about in any of the other interviews he did that we started talking about was the area of relationships. So we're going to continue that conversation a bit here. And just as a reminder, I'm going to give you Jonathan's bio, which is Jonathan Mathis Lester, is a PhD, is a polymath who utilizes psychology, writing, and dance to help others heal and thrive. His roles include licensed clinical psychologist, holistic wellness and relationship coach, professor, author, public speaker, and choreographer. As a public intellectual, Dr. Lester has been featured on television, radio, podcast, print, such as PBS, SiriusXM, and The Hill. Dr. Lester is the award-winning co-editor of Black LGBT Health in the United States, an intersection of race, gender, and sexual orientation. This book receives the Gay and Lesbian Medical Association Achievement Award. It is the first and only text to solely focus on Black LGBT Americans' holistic health. He is currently working on has already worked on his first sole-authored book that is exploring contemporary issues of race and mental health issues in the United States. In addition, Dr. Lester has published numerous articles in academic journals and lay publications, presented his choreography work in prestigious showcases in New York City, and provided psychological services to clients in medical settings across the country. Formerly, Dr. Lester is an associate professor of psychology at Rowan University and chief psychological officer at Lester Health Initiative, co-host of Fly on the Wall on YouTube, and the artistic associate at the Black Acting Method Studio. Welcome back, Jonathan.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here to continue the conversation. And that sounds like a lot of stuff.
Yeah, but I also go back to the story that Dr. Thelma Page tells about the time she went to talk to a set of medical professionals, and she was introduced with the multiple hyphens. And afterwards, someone came up to her and said, "You'd be even more successful if you just focused on one." And that bothered her so much that after a conversation with her mother, she reminded them that some people have to deal with that singular talent and don't know how to deal with people who can do so much more.
That's true. That is so true. I always see the things I do as having a through line, though, right? And all of them are designed to help people heal and thrive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which is a multifaceted thing, and which, especially with what we deal with in our field and having to intersections between the insurance industry and the medical industry, how much the idea of medical necessity can be both useful but also limited.
Yes.
Yeah. And one of those places, as we are going to be discussing today, is relationships, which can have a lot of impact, way more than how those particular structures look at things. I know right now, because part of why I've had to scale some things back is I took on a second job returning to public mental health, sort of community health, and I am working with an agency, the African American Service Organization here in San Jose, to help with some of their mental health services. And I'm seeing it's like this paperwork shows medical necessity, but does not show them moving forward within their lives.
Yes, medical necessity is purely for insurance companies. And the work though that we do in terms of treatment plans and progress notes, that I definitely find helpful on the clinical side because it allows me to think through things, right? Um, whenever I go into a session with a client, I always have like you've seen Avengers, I'm sure,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and the Iron Man movies, and you know how Tony Stark can project the thing out,
Right.
and like that's the way I always think about what I'm doing when I'm in sessions.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of that. It's like that's there for me, and I'm plugging things into the case conceptualization. I'm saying, oh, okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's probably motivating that, and et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the same time, I'm like, okay, now that I know that, let me put that back here and lead
Mm-hmm.
with my heart, lead with
Mm-hmm.
my curiosity, and sort of be present. So it's sort of a both and thing for me. But like you said, when it comes to insurance companies and the medical model and things like that, it is a necessary evil in the current system that we have. But to me, I do what I have to do there, but put it on back burner, right? It is
Mm-hmm.
dictates what I'm doing with my clients.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But it is a relationship we have to be aware of and what influences it has.
Yes, and that's why I'm always clear with all my clients who choose to use insurance, because I do have a few who decided to not use insurance and paying out of pocket. But for
Mm-hmm.
my clients who are using insurance, I say, this is you're going to have a diagnosis. This will be, in your record with the insurance company.
Mm-hmm.
It is confidential. I won't ever break that confidentiality. I was like, but it is out there, and who knows what insurance companies will do and are doing with that
Mm-hmm.
data. So,
Precisely. But let's get away from that particular element of shop talk to talk more about what we were hinting at it when we were talking about your book, and also the experiences that both you and I know and many other people of color have dealing with when it comes to relationships, and especially same-gender loving relationships.
yes, same gender loving relationships are like all relationships. They have their strengths and they have their pain points, if you
Mm-hmm.
will. And what I've been seeing personally among my friends mostly, and also among some of my clients, um, what some of those pain points was one, the difficulty of finding
Mm-hmm.
a compatible partner.
Mm-hmm.
It has become increasingly difficult to do. Some people are pointing to the apps, the
Mm-hmm.
applications that people have on their phone, with the geolocation, and so that people feel like they have endless options.
Mm-hmm.
And so if one person is not perfect in the way in which they want, then they're like, oh, well, let me continue to swipe on this app.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in other times, you were much more bound by the people and like your little, creative
Location.
ideas or whatnot, right? And
Right.
so you made it work. Or now people think they have unlimited options and they don't have to settle. I've heard some
Mm-hmm.
say you don't have to settle. And I often wonder about this idea of settling, and what it often comes to me as is I don't want to compromise.
Mm-hmm.
And compromise is a part of any relationship. And so if you're going into something saying, I don't want to compromise, then you are not entering that relationship, setting yourself up for success. Now, of course, you don't want to compromise on your core values,
Mm-hmm.
but if they may be shorter than you, right? They may, um, you know, be from a family that has um, different religious beliefs than you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like as long as that their partner is treating you right, those are things that maybe you want to compromise on for the health of the relationship. So, but again, a lot of people are like, no compromise. And so that's one thing that I've been seeing getting in the way
Mm-hmm.
of people even finding a suitable partner. And part of that to me speaks to this sort of uh, immaturity. That's
Mm-hmm.
the thing that I've been working with some of my clients on is maturing, particularly for gay and same gender loving men. There's this delayed adolescence phase that
Mm-hmm.
we often go through because of the ways in which a lot of us had to keep our sexual orientation and sexuality hidden in our teenage years while
Mm-hmm.
our peers were out dating and experimenting. So for a lot of gay and same gender loving, queer, etc., men, folks are not doing that sort of thing until their 20s. However, what I've been seeing is that I also have clients who are in their 30s and in
Oh,
their 40s still
yep.
doing it, right? Um, and then they're starting to see some of the drawbacks, but
Mm-hmm.
at this point, that's all they know. And so
Mm-hmm.
part of what I've been doing is helping them understand what does it mean to be gay, because to them it's like, well, if I'm not doing this, then am I gay? How do I meet partners? And I'm like,
Right.
listen, there's a whole world out there. Gay is identity, it's not nightlife.
Right. Or being the hard body at the gym and such. It's how are you living in this world, which I very much support. And I also recognize when I'm talking to some of my clients as well, the standpoint, and I often ask the question is, what's your emotional type? And that range of development, whether it happens in the teenage years or again into these sort of secondary teenage years that come for many queer people who come out and have to go through that developmental stage. What is the type that is going to be emotionally stable for you to live with? Because you're going to spend more time with the person's emotional state than you're going to spend with their physical state, just because we're also aging.
What I found with a lot of my clients, and again, this is selection bias because people
Mm-hmm.
come to therapy typically because something is not going well for them. So I do want
Mm-hmm.
to recognize that I have a biased sample. But what I find with my clients, though, is that they don't really understand their own emotional state.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's hard for them to even start to think about the emotional state of a partner. And for those who have gotten into relationships, I have gotten into relationships with a more emotionally intelligent and attuned partner, it could feel foreign for them
Mm-hmm.
because they're not used to that sort of um, emotional attention. They're not used to emotional calmness. And so it
Mm-hmm.
can feel foreign for them. I had one client tell me, oh, I feel like this person was starting to see me and that scared me.
Mm-hmm. Which goes back also into the what is developmental trauma of what didn't happen in growing up.
Hmm.
I would also add to that the standpoint of those who are looking for someone else to be their emotional regulator, which on a certain aspect, again, going back to the developmental trauma, would be what would happen for a young child working with their parent to grow and live in the world, because the parent, for all intents and purposes, is supposed to have and in ideal situations, a fully developed frontal lobe to provide that co-regulation. But like you're saying, and I think that gets into the emotional type, is how regulated did you get before you started moving into the complexities of a relationship that is going to be very different than the relationship you grew up in, which how many times do we have? I mean, I think about that Jennifer Lopez songs that basically goes, I'm not your mother.
Yes, 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 yes. And I think for a lot of folks, they are getting into relationships before the prefrontal lobe is completely developed, right? Which
Hmm.
I think is set to be around the age of 25. A lot of people are getting into
Hmm.
relationships well before that. And then starting to have those pivotal experiences that they then take with them into the subsequent relationships. Also, you mentioned that the developmental trauma, which we know trauma can affect attachment style.
Hmm.
So then there's the ways in which people attach and feel secure or insecure or anxious within the relationship. And often that is uh, based on that model provided by parents. And so
Hmm.
they're also bringing that into the relationship as well. And, Jennifer Lopez says, I'm not your mother. I actually haven't heard that song, but I do know that some people are going into relationships looking for maybe not a mother per se, but definitely
Caretaker.
caretaker energy, right?
Hmm.
And that's okay if you have a partner who wants to be a caretaker, but if you have
Hmm.
a partner who that's not compatible for and they're looking for someone to be their equal, then those desires are mismatched. So that's the other thing too, is like, how are we determining which desires are suitable and appropriate and harmonious with
Hmm.
which we are engaging?
Hmm. Which also comes into another aspect that I think fits into it is the idea, and I wish I had the meme handy right now, was talking about failure of relationship. That the idea that has hotly always been put forth is there has to be the one, and that you, in reality, we go through multiple relationships and we go through multiple developmental phases in each relationship. And the idea that, oh, this relationship didn't work and somehow we are failed and miserable at it isn't the standpoint. It's like, no, you got whatever you're supposed to learn in that relationship before you're ready. And now you need some time to recover before you go into the next one.
Then that's often what I'm working on with clients is how do we restory, if you will, reimagine this relationship in a way that it is a lesson and not a failure,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so how do we go from I failed to I learned?
Mm-hmm.
And also honoring the beauty that was in a relationship. If there was beauty there, okay,
Mm-hmm.
let's honor that. And also grieving the the imagined future,
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes what I'm finding is not necessarily a person. My clients are often telling me, well, I had a feeling I should have been did this, but
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about, I really wanted this future, or I wanted to have a child, or I wanted this, right? We were planning for this. And so sometimes it's grieving that imagined future more so than it is the actual person themselves.
Which is no different also than talk that often comes up with the parents who now feel like they have to grieve the future that they thought they were going to have having a heterosexual child versus a queer same gender loving child. Yeah, you're still getting that future. You're just it's going to take a different path. And especially that as long as we can hold on to things that are going on right now, doesn't mean that people aren't going to have providing you with grandchildren.
That's true. I know. Again, if we take it from failure or disappointment to lessons and opportunities, things open up. I think about my own mother, who and father for that point, um, definitely did have an imagined future around that looked very much like a heterosexual future for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been amazing though to watch my parents evolve and to be able to see all the opportunities that opened up that
Mm-hmm.
they hadn't imagined for a
Mm-hmm.
heterosexual me. Like if like a heterosexual me probably would be back in Augusta, um,
Mm-hmm.
working at the medical school there, um, going home day in day out, probably having Sunday dinners,
Right.
but that would be it. I don't know if heterosexual me would have done all those things that you read in my.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And also, I don't know if heterosexual me would be so emotionally daring,
Mm-hmm.
if you will, and in ways that have inspired my own family. My mother told me herself, like you inspire me to be more attuned to my emotions and to, communicate them, etc. Right? Which are all things she didn't see growing up and
Mm-hmm.
definitely wasn't encouraged by my father. So it's very interesting when we let go of that preconceived notion and open up. Sometimes the things that we open up to could be even better than what we were anticipating. And the same is true in romantic relationships.
Mm-hmm.
You often have people with all these lists and they got 80 different things on them. And it's just like, okay, well, what's the core?
Right.
Don't let that core pick 4 or 5 of those things. Those are your core. Let those be your non-negotiables.
Right.
Okay. Now, what else? What else? Right.
Yeah, the sort of another way to put it is have your expectations become so much and so specific they can never be fulfilled.
Exactly. And again, because we are therapists, I'm often wondering, is this on purpose?
Mm-hmm. A sense of safety, because if they have, it goes actually. Did you ever see the movie Practical Magic, which I know they're coming back as a second one?
Yes, I said,
And there's a scene in there where, well, I think it's Sandra Bullock's character creates such a specific love spell. She thinks that, and especially this is as a child who creates this love spell that does not expect that it can ever be fulfilled, so her heart can never be broken again.
Yep.
And so when does that expectation flip and become a protective measure?
Yeah. And it's so specific that it's likely to not be fulfilled. And then I have clients who then are hurt and are saying things to themselves like, oh, why can't I find this person? And I'm like, but is this person realistic? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And why have you created an unrealistic person to be with? Meanwhile, there may be someone in your orbit who's trying to, shoot their shot, and you're like, yeah, but he doesn't have all these things on this list. It's just like, okay, what's going on there? And then I've also had the case where there are clients who finally do get in a relationship and they say, oh, this is too much work. And I'm always like, yeah, that's what it is. Relationships are work. And guess what? Love is an action. So,
Right. And I think, but another element to that, I think, is an offshoot is the idea that, and the reality that how many relationships, especially that they grew up in and they've watched, and also been normalized in our society, have also been about survival as opposed to love, or been about structure as opposed to emotion and spirit.
I agree. So many of the relationships, at least that I can speak to myself, that I've grown up seeing, my own mother and father, it was very much about raising a family together, surviving together. There were moments of shared affection, physical affection in front of us, but for the most part, it was about duty in a lot of right. I've been talking to a couple of friends recently about not having role models, and we definitely know that role models are important. But do those role models have to be in the house? Because I've had some clients say, well, my parents didn't do this, or I didn't see this in my neighborhood, et cetera, et cetera. And I think about imagination, and I'm like, you didn't imagine it, you didn't read a book, you didn't see a TV show, nothing, right? Because I'll be honest with myself, I wasn't seeing any black same gender loving male couples, but guess what? I was reading Elon Harris, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was watching Noah's Ark. I was watching Queer as Folk for that matter, right? So
Mm-hmm.
were at least something I could latch on to think about what I might want my relationship to look like. Not carbon copies of those things, but the elements of those things. And so I think even if we don't have a concrete role model right in front of us in the flesh, there are ways in which we can find inspirations in art and literature, so that we could start to imagine and build the type of relationships that we want and that could be appropriate for us.
Mm-hmm. That was sort of a conversation I was recently having with another of my clients. As we have who is queer, and he and his partner, who are going to be getting married soon, were bringing up. We've done work where it's about realizing just how much your family has been influencing and how you've been modeling even the idea you're going to have this relationship with your partner, and yet the struggles you're encountering could never have happened within your parents' structure and so forth. So who are the other queer people around you that you're seeing that can show you these other things and relationships, because you are in those areas, not the same areas your parents are. And I think it's also that statement of saying, look, I think, to go into the geekdom, I'd rather see the relationship between Harley and Ivy versus Harley and the Joker.
Oh yes, yes, Harley and Joker. Ooh, that's a toxic one.
That
Right?
is toxic. Yeah, not to say that Harvey and Ivy don't have their difficulties, but that has been much more stable for both of them for a much longer period versus the constant instability in that relationship.
Mhm.
Which, again, I think there is some very fair quantity of same-gender lover people who go for that. And I think there's a question of, are you really interested in the person, or are you interested in the idea of the bad boy, the chaos, are you really interested in that energy as opposed to the person?
Mm-hmm. And that energy, because it feels chaotic, which again, if you're coming from a background with trauma, childhood trauma, then that chaotic energy, while it may be distressing, it feels familiar. And because
Mm-hmm.
it's familiar, it's comfortable and it's what people are used to going for. So that energy, I think a lot of people are seeking energy more so than they're seeking one person, and they
Mm-hmm.
don't really understand that. They say because I'm sure you had them come to you. Why do I keep picking the same person? I know it's not good for me.
Mm-hmm.
Because the energy, your nervous system is used to a particular type of energy, and when you're calm, you go into panic mode, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it feels foreign to you at a bodily and energetic level. So yeah, so a lot of people are, as the old folks that I know would say, water seeks its same level, right? So
Mm-hmm.
people whose energy is chaotic because that's what they know is also seeking chaotic energy, even though intellectually they may know that
Mm-hmm.
it's not going to end well for them.
Which also brings it back to the idea, too, of you are worthy of calm.
Worthiness is huge. And I think a lot of people either don't have relationships or continue to enter into unhealthy relationships because, as much as they intellectually want that fairy tale or healthy relationship, if you will, they don't feel worthy of it.
Mm-hmm.
Again, what if they see me? What if they see my flaws? What if they see my darkness? Then they're not going to want me. They're not going
Mm-hmm.
to stay around. I'm not worth all the hassle.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And that's a struggle I think that many are sitting with, many are still working with. And I think it's also a lifelong challenge that goes through. I just was having a conversation with my partner this weekend about some of my own body dysmorphia issues that have been coming up lately. And even I don't know why they're coming up, but they're coming up, and we had to have a conversation about it. Not about that it was him having any particular issues and loving me as it is, but it was within myself. So I think that's a perfect place for us to take a break here on Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. I'm Perry Clark, licensed marriage and family therapist, here with Dr. Jonathan Lester, PhD, author of How I Know White People Are Crazy and Other Stories. And we'll be back on our second half. So stay tuned, folks. We'll be back shortly.
Our lives and the world around us can get messy and frustrating. Untangle and Grow Counseling's focus is to untangle that mess and make sense of it so you have a good foundation to build and grow from. Visit us on the web at untangleandgrowcounseling.com. Perry Clark offers individual psychotherapy, couples and family therapy, and adolescence therapy from a variety of coping materials and resources. Visit untangleandgrowcounseling.com for more information.
Discover the power of music to heal and uplift. Introducing NeuroVibe, where rhythm meets recovery. NeuroVibe fuses ambient music textures with rhythmic layers to create music that goes beyond relaxation. It's crafted to resonate deeply, perfect for relaxation, self-reflection, or therapeutic sessions. NeuroVibe invites you to connect with your inner self through immersive sound. Explore NeuroVibe today on SoundCloud and experience the transformative power of music. Tune in, find your vibe, and discover what NeuroVibe can do for you. For more information, check out NeuroVibe on SoundCloud today at soundcloud.com/NeuroVibe Brainspotting. NeuroVibe is intended for general wellness and relaxation purposes and is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Explore NeuroVibe now on SoundCloud. Dive in, find your rhythm, and feel better with NeuroVibe.
Follow Voice America at facebook.com/Voice America for juicy updates from your favorite radio shows and podcasts.
You are listening to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. If you have a question or comment about our podcast, send an email to pclark@untyingknotspodcast.com. That's pclark@untyingknotspodcast.com. And now, back to the program.
Hello all, welcome back to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. I'm Perry Clark, licensed marriage and family therapist, here with you, and with me is Dr. Jonathan Lester, PhD, author of How I Know White People Are Crazy and Other Stories. So we've been talking much more about relationships, which is also a very big portion of his book that I know doesn't get talked about often in other podcasts. And we are talking about same-gender loving or queer relationships, whether they be men and men, women and women, non-binary, and also transgenders aspects of it. And another of these areas that I think comes up and we also have to dance with in the standpoint that the relationship will be different and there is different framing is the relationship around monogamy, open relationship, polyamory, and such, and what is available and permissible that may not ever fit, again, the heterosexual / monogamous model.
Yes, this is something that I've seen with my clients, again, is this idea of opening relationships. And it's interesting because at least in New York City, I've heard rumblings from some folks that are like, oh, everyone's in an open relationship. All can be in an open relationship, you know. I don't know how true that is, right? I'm just hearing that from some friends. But what I see with my therapy clients is what makes a relationship work, whether it is monogamous, monogamish, or open, is communication.
Right. Or especially poly.
Right. You have to have communication and clear boundaries around what you are doing. too often, again, I have a selection bias because people are coming to see me because something's going wrong. Too often for my clients, though, there is vagueness around
Mm-hmm.
communication. And I have also had clients who may not have actually been as much into polyamory or opening up the relationship, but something was going wrong, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
we weren't having as much sex as we used to, so we decided to open up. And I'm like, Is that the most appropriate response to
Mm-hmm.
having as much sex? Maybe go see a sex therapist. Maybe expand your repertoire of what you're calling sex, right?
Mm-hmm.
But just saying, okay, so let's go have sex with other people, to me, that seems to be a sort of haphazardous, knee-jerk response to sex declining in a relationship. And
Mm-hmm.
we look at the research, sex declines in every relationship. It
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean that you become open. Um, and so oftentimes I'm seeing people using open relationships as something that they are trying to address something else in the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
For the people that I see with healthy open relationships, again, those relationships have very clear guidelines, particularly around emotional intimacy and physical intimacy and what's allowed and what's not allowed. And so I think each relationship is going to be, and how it works is going to be unique to the person, but that communication is essential. And you have to ask yourself, am I doing this because this is something that I genuinely feel, or am I doing this because I'm trying to fix something else?
Or another one would be, am I doing this to avoid something else?
Yes.
Which brings the thought of how often, and I know I've talked with a few of my own clients, the standpoint of how much is this also, going back into that idea of worth, the way that they saw themselves finding worth. And that may be for any number of reasons of what happened, again, developmentally, that the measure of worth might have come through sex. The measure of worth might have come through the aspect of looks. And how is that, again, translated or not translated as we get older?
100%. I'm thinking about one client in particular who I won't name or even give any identifying details about because I am a licensed clinical psychologist beholden to the ethics board. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm thinking about one client in particular who, yeah, definitely everything that you just said. The worthiness is tied up into looks, and how many people wants to have sex with them
Mm-hmm.
in one night.
Yeah.
Right?
That sense of being desired.
Exactly. This sense of being desired, and how for some people desirability, they equate that with attention, or they
Mm-hmm.
equate that with love, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's just like, oh no, love is much deeper. Love is an action. It's not just a transaction.
Mm-hmm. As you also said, love is also one of those things that requires work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you have to
And
be able to love yourself in order to believe that someone else could love you, right?
mm-hmm.
And that goes back to that worthiness piece.
Mm-hmm. Which becomes very much an area that is struggled by many queer people, being the fact that how much our sense of ourselves, especially as we're developing younger, is being hit with the idea that our existence is somehow off-putting to the rest of the world.
Yes, there are so many messages that we receive from outside sources that something's wrong with us. And we
Mm-hmm.
internalize those messages from a very early age. I remember for myself, my father was always saying things like, put some bass in your voice, don't walk like that. Take that wig off your head and put some bass in your voice. What's this thing? And I was like, I don't have on a wig, so I'm confused.
Mm-hmm.
But it
And
was his way of saying, be manly. And so that was an early message that something was wrong. I'm not okay. And then also growing up in the Southern Black church, there were always these messages about fire and brimstone and not lying with a man, it's lying with a woman and stuff. So there are lots of sources that teach us from a very early age, even before our brains can really process it, that something is wrong with us and we're in danger or we're bad. Yeah.
Which then becomes an aspect of what does that survival sense come in? And going back to what we were listing off, the aspect of what are we doing to survive? What are we by avoiding, running to, reinforcing comes into play. Because I remember this one guy it was a men's conference, and the speaker was queer, and he basically said at the age of 10, his mom or someone had gotten this other guy to come and talk to him and said, well, I hear you've got sugar in your tank.
Yeah.
How is a 10-year-old supposed to understand this adult concept of sugar in your tank equaling gay?
That's so funny because
it's not even age-appropriate conversation.
It's not age-appropriate. But my father would say similar things, right? But it's funny to me, not because of that message, because clearly the message is damaging. It's funny to me that, yeah, you would expect a child to even I didn't even understand what my father was saying most of the time. I just knew the energy he was saying it with. And so I was like, okay, so this must be wrong, but I don't know what sugar in your tank means, right?
Right. Or any type of euphemism like that.
Exactly. So, but those are, again, get implanted even before we have an understanding of language fully, and so if that's happening, it's bypassing our intellect and going straight into our consciousness and it's stuck there. For some people, they are getting into romantic relationships to heal that sort of those sorts of experiences. And as we talked about, for others, they are recreating those experiences in some ways. And some would say recreating them so that they can master them. So these things definitely have an effect overall. I'm often looking at clients who are often in intercultural relationships, and which I believe I saw a study once. Don't quote me on this; it's been a while, but I believe I saw a study once that described how in queer communities there is a lot more intercultural dating than in heterosexual communities. And I don't actually know the reason around that. I'm curious what you think, but I do see that happening more. And one of the things that I see that can come out of that is, again, those opportunities to learn so much more, to learn how other people are dealing with things from a different cultural background that may be helpful to you. I myself am in a intercultural relationship. My partner's 20 years older than me. He's also of a different faith and a different race. And when I was coming up, when I met him, I was very much in my by any means necessary Malcolm X mode. I was like, I'm going to graduate school. My head's down. Nothing else is going to get in my way. And because of that, I was very much critical. I had this critical voice that it didn't say you're not smart. I always knew I was smart, but it said you got to work harder. Right? That's again going back to that message for getting as a child. My dad would say you got to work twice as hard to get half as far. So even in graduate school, I was like, you got to work harder, no days off. And then my partner, though, at the time was like, oh no, you could take a break. It's fine. But so he just grew up in a culture where it was much more compassion and self-compassion. And that was healing for me because I think because my family was much more working class and financially strained, survival was on the table. And so for me, that was my mindset. It's like, this education is about survival and I have to be in tip-top shape at all times.
Right.
Yeah.
I think, and before I go into further, that aspect is also for people to recognize culture has multiple meanings, as opposed to just purely what we break down into the issues of race and such and aspect, but there is a culture of age, there's a culture of religion, there's a culture, as we've also been talking about, the sense of worth and how that translates into the relationships, whether it is a May to December relationship, whether it's a relationship of the Northern Hemisphere and the Southern Hemisphere, whether it is a relationship of Eastern cultures versus Western cultures, or even ideas, or even just the sense of faiths. All of those are cultures that are at play, and all of those have, as I am a Star Trek fan, infinite diversity and infinite combination. The Edict. Those opportunities are something that, in so many cases, are the beauty that can come with a relationship. And I think on that standpoint of when we're looking at same-gender relationships, they're a reminder that, yeah, the only difference, these other cultural components are the differences that we have, but we're still biologically human, same gender. Yeah. And again, also going into what you said about the availability of what's around you will also influence that too. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, and it's already I would say, a smaller pool to pull from in the same gender aspect. So if I want to even remotely have a relationship, I've got to look at what's around me, both what works physically, what works monetarily, and then what works, and my big one is emotionally.
Yes, what works emotionally, and I would add to that spiritually. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I value so much with my relationship is the spiritual connection. We actually have two different faith backgrounds. Mm-hmm. I'm born in Black church in the South, right? And he grew up in a synagogue in Massachusetts, right? Mm-hmm. However, we both have an understanding of spirituality and appreciation for the spirit world and the unseen, mm-hmm. so that we could come together in that way and work on our relationship, both in real time, but also in a spiritual way as well. Mm-hmm. And so that is I think essential. And I'm often, when I work with my clients, I ask that question. It's like, what are your spiritual beliefs? What is your partner's spiritual beliefs? There's so many people don't even talk about that. Mm-hmm. And I think part of it, particularly for same-gender loving people, is that they've been hurt by religion so much, mm-hmm. that they also throw away the spiritual piece. Mm-hmm. But that spiritual piece could be, again, one of those things that adds so much joy and strength to a relationship.
Mm-hmm. Well, and there is very fundamentally, difference between religion and spirituality, which can also be one of those places in life development and maturing to be able to realize the difference.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And that also then feeds into how are we looking at what is the emotional type of person I want to spend the next umpteen number of years with.
And again, I think a lot of relationships could be more fruitful if people took the time beforehand, mm-hmm. to understand all those things that you're talking about, at least start the work of understanding all those things you're talking about. And then once in the relationship, be open and flexible. Mm-hmm. Again, you don't want to compromise your core values, but what are the things that you can learn? What are some of the things you can let go? What are some of the things that you can say, well, this is important to me, but I don't need to do this with my partner. I can do it else. Some people are like, well, I want my partner to do this with me. And it's just like, okay, that's cool. And what's going to happen if your partner says that they don't want to do that with you? Mm-hmm. Oh, are they now a bad partner? Mm-hmm. It's like, no. So how do we leave space also for our partner or partners to be themselves as well, so that they can be as whole, so that they can come back and be with us and help us as well.
Right. Just as you're saying, it's like, yeah, I want my partner to do this. Well, your partner may want you to do some things too. And again, it's the mutuality as opposed to it's a one-way relationship, which I think still comes back to that aspect of where are some people wanting their partner to literally be their parent.
Yes.
Or their caretaker.
Or their caretaker. Right. And again, my experience has been that most people want somewhat of equal footing with them. I do know of some BDSM relationships, right, where that is the dynamic, right? Caretaker versus caretakee. I don't know. and that works for them, but again, it's about that communication. One can't be expecting a sort of caretaking but not having discussed that with the other person, right? So that communication, again, it comes down to the communication and how and what nurturing each other is going to look like in the relationship.
Which is going to be different, which may very much not look like your parents' relationship.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I know I've had some other clients, couples I've worked with, and it's like, your parents' relationship wasn't everything. They actually had some skills missing. And we need, for your relation to work, we need you develop new skills. But your parents were not the most complete relationship that was out there.
Exactly. And again, that's why people say, well, I didn't have a role model of that. And yeah, if you didn't have a role model of what was healthy, but you may have had a role model of chaos, but that's something different, right? You definitely recreate that chaos. And skill building is so important. One of the things that I'm often doing with my clients is helping them start to slow down and understand that every conversation is an emotional conversation. And what I mean by that is that emotions are at play. They're present in every interaction. And a lot of times the conflict arises because people aren't recognizing, the partner isn't recognizing their counterparts' emotions, like what they're saying. They may only be registering the surface emotions, not the underlying emotions. And that partner may be only communicating their surface emotions because they feel afraid or may feel too vulnerable to communicate the underlying emotions. And so those emotional levels and communicating about underlying emotions and not just those superficial emotions becomes a skill that I've seen help a lot of my clients.
And especially going back into the developmental trauma, they may have never been able to, let alone learn how to do that. So there is I think there is one other larger, again, myth that goes on into this, because I know I usually ask about myth and reality around mental health, is that just because somebody is a physical, biological adult doesn't mean that their emotional age is also that. And how much are we oftentimes dealing with stunted development and assuming that they are all operating from rational adults? No.
No. The word maturity has been coming up with a lot of my clients. What does it mean to mature? I think I see a lot of gay, same-gender loving men in my practice. So that's what I'm thinking about right now. And it's like, what does it mean to mature? You know, you're going into your 30s, your 40s, some even 50s, and you're still thinking about doing the things you were doing in your 20s. You know, you're still thinking about relationships in a very rigid way. You're still thinking about value and worth in very rigid ways, right? I get my worth from my job, et cetera, et cetera. So to me, that is a sign of immaturity in the sense that they have yet to do enough work to progress and evolve and expand. For me, maturity is about expansion. It's about opening up possibilities, opening up pathways, whereas immaturity is very rigid. We think things are should be like this person should be like this, I should be like this.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it has this rigidity to it.
The to use another term, concrete thinking versus abstract thinking.
Yes, 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 right. And so I'm often working with clients to help them develop that psychological flexibility so that they can mature. I've had, some clients, I just ask them, what does it mean to be gay? Right. And
Mm-hmm.
it floors them. So,
Mm-hmm.
because it's just like, well, they just took on this definition that they've seen and not really questioning it. I say, okay, now if we take away all those things, what does it mean for you? How do you show up? How do you
Mm-hmm.
embody this? As an African centered psychologist, I think about the Dagara tribe of West Africa, right? And the whole gatekeepers uh,
Mm-hmm.
positionality. And for me, being same gender loving is not just something I do sexually, but it is a spiritual
Mm-hmm.
position. It is a communal position. I have a
Mm-hmm.
responsibility to the communities around me. And I think when we start to embrace those parts of our sexual orientation, sexuality, I think we become more whole, more full. And again, unfortunately, what I'm seeing in my practice is that folks are too narrow. They're not even thinking beyond,
Mm-hmm.
they're not thinking about sexuality beyond the act of sex.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And there's just so many things that reinforce just that level versus the expanded realm that it can have. I know sometimes I'll also just ask my clients, is like, so why are we letting the child drive this in the driver's seat? I mean, if we just look at things like Grand Theft Auto, how do
Yeah.
kids drive?
Yes.
Versus how do we need to be able to drive for everyone's safety, let alone for you to get there? No, that's where we need to let the adult in. And how do we now strengthen the adult to get that kid out of the driver's seat and let the adult drive the experience? Because guess what? You got a lot farther with the adult than the kid.
No crashes, or at least fewer crashes with the adult driving.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let alone also getting them to trust their adult.
Yes. Yes. Getting them to trust their adult and getting them to discover that the adult is there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And waiting to step in. I'm often doing imagery exercises about
Mm-hmm.
that with my clients. Imagine, the wise, the kind, the compassionate version of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And what does the kid inside of you who's dysregulated need to hear? Imagine that version of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Soothing, your parents did this in that situation, but what would this more wise, compassionate person who's not in survival mode say in this situation, right?
Let alone the power that they have,
Mm-hmm.
the capacity,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which also mirrors what I'm saying too about what is the emotional type that you want to have a relationship with. Do you want to have your emotional type be a little kid, or do you want it to be a full adult? Mm-hmm. So I think we're going to go ahead and leave folks there to contemplate that as we move into this Pride Month for 2026. We wish everybody well, and we also thank them for being here. And I want to thank you for writing this book and being willing to come up and have this conversation.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. And it's always a pleasure to talk about these things. This is what I've dedicated my life to. Mental health is my passion. And marginalized communities of the global majority is where I put my expertise. And so I'm happy to always be having these conversations. And yeah, so the book is How I Know White People Are Crazy and Other Stories, and where I talk about my own coming of age, if you will, as a Black loving man and becoming a psychologist. And yeah, people can find me at Lassiter Health on Instagram and other social media platforms. And I'm just really excited about doing the work and having these conversations. So thank you so much, Barry.
No problem. Thank you again. And we'll be stay tuned for one of our next episodes coming up. We wish you well and be safe out there as we're focusing on surviving so that we can have a future.
Yes.
All right. Be well, folks. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in for Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. Be sure to join your host, Perry Clark, for another episode on the podcast coming soon on the Voice America Empowerment Channel.
Discover the power of music to heal and uplift. Introducing NeuroVibe, where rhythm meets recovery. NeuroVibe fuses ambient music textures with rhythmic layers to create music that goes beyond relaxation. It's crafted to resonate deeply, perfect for relaxation, self-reflection, or therapeutic sessions. NeuroVibe invites you to connect with your inner self through immersive sound. Explore NeuroVibe today on SoundCloud and experience the transformative power of music. Tune in, find your vibe, and discover what NeuroVibe can do for you. For more information, check out NeuroVibe on SoundCloud today at soundcloud.com/NeuroVibe Brainspotting. NeuroVibe is intended for general wellness and relaxation purposes and is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Explore NeuroVibe now on SoundCloud. Dive in, find your rhythm, and feel better with NeuroVibe.